Well, John chapter 11 says this: when Jesus had finished instructing his disciples, he went on therefrom to teach and preach in their cities. Now when John heard in prison about the deeds of Christ, he sent a word by his disciples and said to him, "Are you the one who is supposed to come, or shall we wait for another?" And Jesus answered them, "Go and tell John what you hear and seek or see. The blind receive sight, and the lame walk. The lepers are cleansed, and deaf hear, and the dead are raised up, and the poor have the good news preached to them. And blessed is the one who is not offended by me." Blessed is the one who is not offended by me. This is a time in John's life when he is imprisoned. Well, he kind of spoke against the guy in town, the guy in charge, and he was thrown into prison. And he's kind of cornered from every single direction. And he, when you have one of those really low moments in your life, and you begin to question things, well, John is having one of those moments. And he sends, his disciples, because obviously John the Baptist, he had his own disciples, and says, "Could you go to Jesus and ask him, 'Jesus, are you the one, are we supposed to wait for somebody else?'" And it's interesting because John asked him that. Wait a second, John, you're talking about someone here that your whole life, your whole point of you even being on this earth was to prepare the way for Jesus. You were told from the time you were a kid that your mission is to make sure that you prepare the way for Messiah. There's no question about that. And as he grew, there's a moment where Jesus is walking towards him, and it wasn't anybody else. It was John who looks at Jesus and says, "Look, here comes the Lamb that takes away the sin of the world." This is John who's supposed to prepare the way for Jesus. And his questioning, is Jesus really the Messiah? Have you ever had a moment like that? Where you kind of like, I've been going to church for a very long time. And my parents, they spoke life into me before I was even born. You probably heard stories how much your parents prayed for you. And growing up, you had the sense and call of God in your life that, hey, I'm going to grow up to be the man God has called me to be, or the woman that God has called me to be. Somewhere along the way, you kind of lost kind of like the direction in your life, and you start to questioning, is God real? Is Jesus really the Savior of the world? And especially, is He my Savior? You begin to question things. Because God knows I've had my own doubts and I've had my own questions. And I remember growing up, I was 16 years old. I had my own crisis of faith, you could say, or a crisis, and they say midlife crisis. I had an early life crisis where you start to question, okay, is God real? How do I know this is true? It especially happens when you're cornered by everyone. When you feel like there's not much use in serving God anymore. What's the point of it all? John is finding himself in this kind of mentality where he is pressured, and he knows he might not make it. He knows that he probably will be killed. So he sends Jesus a messenger saying, "Jesus, are you the one, or should we wait for somebody else that's the Messiah?" I don't know about you, but a lot of times when you are going through a difficulty, it doesn't just happen. You woke up in the morning, you're faced with a really hard difficulty. I mean, there are times where maybe you've lost a loved one and it's kind of automatic, where you're dealing with a lot. But for the most part, it sort of builds up, right? It's one thing after another. It's something that you have not resolved yesterday that maybe is bothering you in the morning. And then as the day progresses, everyone starts to get on your nerves, and they start to get, it kind of escalates. Even coming here today, I have to apologize and I have to confess, if you're a leader in the house, you're kind of wondering, why is Slavik not saying hi to people? Most likely because I was trying to run around, make sure that the service runs how it's supposed to run. And there's like, a lot of people don't realize how many details go into putting together every single Friday service. We're on Sunday, and that's what we hope that as God is calling you, that you'd step up and say, you know what, I'm gonna take care of this ministry. Because there's, in church they say that there's 20% of people that do 80% of the work, and then there's 80% of people that do 20% of the work, And so it kind of builds up, and I'm like, man, I have to preach, and then, this is not working, this is not working, this is not working, and you're trying to deal with all this, and it gets to a point where Satan is trying to stop what God has already he put in motion. And it builds up and builds up, and a lot of times he'll come. He says the enemy. The Bible says the enemy, when he comes like a flood, and he starts to overwhelm you. Maybe somebody at work said something against you, or maybe somebody talked behind your back, or maybe somebody that had something on you kind of exposed you, or I don't know what you came in here with, or maybe there's guilt, or maybe there's shame, or maybe there's a sin in your life, or maybe, I'm not sure where you came in here dealing with. But for me, it looked like this, where I started to for days, and then it was weeks and then months, where I constantly would just mess up, and then, people remind me of my mess. They would remind me of my mess up. And it kind of, the way I can put it so you understand, if you went to the gym for any amount of time, especially the first day that you go to the gym, after that you're pretty sore, right? Like you go and you come back home and everything starts to kind of hurt. And then, somebody pushes you, or somebody kind of hugs you too hard, and you're like, could you not do that because I'm sore? And that's your first mistake, because then they automatically feel the need that they have to know exactly where are you sore. They have to find out exactly what hurts. I don't know, like I do that all the time. When somebody tells me they're sore, the first thing I have to do is, okay, where exactly are you sore? So you learn pretty quickly that if you're sore, you don't tell people that you're sore. It's just not a good idea. But I think it's even worse when you have an injury. Like, let's say your hand is broken, or you have a cut in your hand and somebody squeezes it really hard, and you pull back in pain, right? Like, you pull back because you're like, don't do that because it hurts. I think one of the dumbest things that I've done, we went to Canada with one of my friends, and he had a broken rib, and I had this bright idea that I should run and tackle him. And I did. And then I realized what I did, and I remembered what he told me, and I had no idea why I decided that this would be a good idea to go tackle him. And he turned around all this pain, right? And he's just like, are you serious? Did you just do this right now? Well, needless to say, no amount of apology, right, is gonna really make that right. I mean, he experienced all this pain because of me. But you see, a lot of times, we are quick to point out when something hurts physically. And we make sure that people know that, hey, you shouldn't be punching me here, or you shouldn't be, tackling me here because I'm hurting. But when it comes to the spiritual things, when it comes to dealing with the emotional hurts, we kind of don't really tell people about it. Somebody comes and says, well, you're just a mess up. You kind of begin to, okay, well, I'm just going to let it go. And somebody makes fun of you in front of a whole bunch of people, and you're like, I'll just let it go. And then somebody brings up your past and saying, well, how many times have you been coming to church? Oh, how many times have you come to the altar? How many times have you really dedicated your life to Christ? Oh, we'll see how that goes. People have a way of saying stuff that's very sarcastic, They have a way of getting to you. But we usually try not to make a big deal out of it. And especially if there's a wound that you don't want people to know about. And it's that one specific. If you're dealing with a weight problem, it just takes one comment for someone to make, or one joke. Or if you're a guy in this place and you kind of find yourself that you're not very good at sports, and when somebody makes a, like, dude, what are you, a girl? Like, that's pretty insulting. But, you're not going to say much back because you're like, okay, well, they obviously don't know me. And you begin to hear this, and at the beginning, maybe you are revolting against it, right? Like, this is not who I am. But then slowly, the more people say this about you, the more you start to agree with it. The more you're okay with it, and you're like, well, apparently must be true because, that's what everybody's saying around me. Apparently must be, and it may be at the beginning, it might not even be conscious, consciously. It might be subconsciously. You start to agree with it. Well, that's just who I am. I've always been a drug addict. I'll be a drug addict. I've always had an issue with porn. I'm going to have an issue with porn. And you begin to make peace with something that it was not in God's design for you. You begin to make peace with something that God did not design for you. Well, I'm always attracted to the wrong people, so, oh well. You begin to make peace with something that God did not design you for. You see, the awesome thing about pain is a symptom. It's not really the problem. There are people actually that don't feel any pain, and that's a huge problem. They'll set their hand on a burning stove, and they would be like, what is that smell? Oh, it's my hand. Because there's no reaction. So actually, not to have any pain is a horrible thing. Pain is a symptom that, hey, you shouldn't be doing this. So you have to pull your hand back. Pain points to a deeper problem. If I press against you, and it's a very sore spot because it's all bruised up, it tells me that there's a problem with that, right? Like, there's a problem with your arm. You shouldn't ignore it. Or if you don't recall how you got that bruise, you should probably wonder. Like, right before camp, I went to work, and basically I sat down. I'm like, why is it hurt so bad in here? And I pull my shirt up, and there's like a blue kind of like bruise, a huge bruise, and it's all blue. And I'm like, I have no idea how I got this. And that was like literally my first time in my life that I got a bruise, and I have no idea how I got the bruise. Well, for the most part, you know when you hurt yourself. If you have something that maybe got stuck in your hand and it started to cause a whole bunch of infection, you should probably not be putting a Band-Aid over it and call it good. Right? You should probably open that up. Have one, maybe not you. Maybe you should go look that up and have them clean that up and sew it back together and let it heal. So when we talk about pain, it's supposed to point to a different problem. And but if you don't take care of it, if you start making, hey, well, that spot always hurt. I've always had bad knees, so I'll just ignore it. It's not going to go away. It's going to intensify. When somebody comes and causes you pain, well, the Lord Jesus told me to forgive them. Yeah. But he told you to forgive them. You have to forgive. But you shouldn't put yourself in the position to get hurt again. Trust and forgiveness, they're two different things. Okay? You're supposed to forgive a person, but God doesn't expect you to place yourself in the same area to be hurt again by the same person. Does that make sense? Trust is a whole different thing. Trust is earned. And if somebody's abused the relationship that you have with them, you shouldn't be like, oh, well, I'm supposed to forgive. Yeah, you're supposed to forgive, but don't put yourself in a position to get hurt again about that person. That person needs to earn your respect once again. That person needs to earn your trust once again. But with me, it was always that. I was always walking underneath this condemnation that I was never really good enough. Because I would hear it for, like it was one of those moments where I would, be on we're supposed to play soccer, and you know how, I'm not sure if they do it here, but like there's two guys that usually are best at soccer, and they're supposed to choose their team, and they'll like, they'll flip a coin, and then they're like, oh, okay, I'll get, I'll get Alex, and I'll get, Serge, and then you're just kind of, chilling there, you're like, yeah, probably next. Nope, they don't choose your name. And then it goes on, and you're like, well, I think they're saving the best for last. Doesn't apply here. Usually they don't save the best for last because they want the best team like players on their team. And then you figure out you're the last one there, and they're like, yeah, well, I guess we'll take Slavic, I guess, And you're like, seriously, dude? Like, seriously? And then the whole time you're playing that game, you're trying to outdo yourself. And you play under this pressure. You have this pressure to perform, and it actually messes you up. Because the more you try, the more it throws you back in the cycle. And then there's those games where the captains, they don't really care how you play, but they like you. And they're like, hey, you know what? I don't care if you mess up the whole game, but like I like you and we're good. And you're like, yeah, and you actually do really good. Why? Because one speaks of life and the other one speaks of death. One of it speaks legalism. Do good. If you just played good, then I would choose you. But the other one speaks of faith. The other one speaks of grace, saying, hey, you know what? I love you no matter what. I care about you. I don't care how you play. You're going to play on my team no matter what. And then that gives you a confidence. You no longer have to play underneath this pressure to perform. And when I thought about my life, it was a constant pressure to perform. My dad was sort of always he was never really known for showing emotions. Like literally, I was about 23 and I would hug him and he did not know how to hug back. That was awkward. He didn't really know how to show emotion. And I would carry that he would always kind of like, yeah, but you could have done a better job, And the constant kind of, thing in my head was, people are saying this, and I started to make kind of peace with this, and I was under this pressure that, Slavic, when am I gonna be good at schoolwork? By the way, until my fourth grade, I failed pretty much everything. In my fifth grade, my mom started working for the cafeteria, and I got really motivated really quick. And within a year, I became the president of my class. So I don't know how that happened, but I was a really bad student for the first 4 years of my schooling. And I always would kind of wonder, when am I gonna be good enough at school? When am I going to be good enough at playing basketball? Well, newsflash, I'm still not good. I've never been good. And it was a constant thing. When are you gonna learn how to do this? And it was a constant thing that would be in the back of my head. Well, and it would throw me back in the loop of performing under pressure and trying to impress people, and constantly would go over and over and over in the same cycle. And I felt that God had the same idea of me. Because I was taking my cues from people about my performance, I started to look at God the same way. And I felt like the whole frown of heaven was upon me. Like I'd wake up and I had 10 things that I'm supposed to do today. And I go to sleep and I'm like, now I have 12. What did I do the whole day today? And I walked under this constant condemnation. It's like, when are you going to learn self-discipline? When are you going to be preaching more? When are you be spending more time in prayer? When are you going to spend more time in the Word? When are you going to help the church better? When are you going to do this? And when are you going to do this? And it was a constant, like, obviously I didn't hear an audible voice, but that was kind of like the constant pressure that I performed under. And I was never, like the crown, the frown of heaven was like the best way I can describe it is like a overcast sky. Like there's never any kind of break to bring any kind of light. There's always a storm. There's always something brewing on the horizon, right? Like someone's is not okay with what I'm doing. And I started to look at God that way, and I started to compare myself with the characters in the Bible and the Bible stories. And I'd look at David, I'm like, why can't I be more like David? Why can't I be more like Samson? Why can't I be more like Moses? Why can't I be more like Joseph? And it was a constant thing. But then, as time went on, God spoke to my heart, and He showed me chapter 38 of Genesis. And we don't have time to go deep into all those things, but what I do want to say about this chapter is, if you look at the book of Genesis, is this story of God. It's really God's story of how God's going to bring redemption on earth. And so He chooses all these people, and we get to Joseph, and Joseph is this young man who his whole life, he was kind of mistreated, but he did what was right in God's sight. And every single sermon that I would hear on this story was, Slavik, if you just do right, God's going to bless you. That was kind of usually the message of the story of Joseph. And I'm like, I would come to church and listen to it and be like, great. I thought the bar was really, high. Well, I think the bar just got elevated a little bit more. But you see, Joseph's family had a lot of problems. I don't know if you guys noticed, but, if you look in your family and you think your family is dysfunctional, well, Jacob's family was very dysfunctional. I mean, I don't think any of your brothers or sisters sold you into slavery, right? Like, nobody really took you and sold you in human trafficking. That was just wrong. But that was done to Joseph. And when you look at this whole story, you're like, okay, well, if I could just hold, no matter what happens to me, if I can just be like Joseph, if I can just do what Joseph did, then I'll be a man of God. I'll be good. But then you get to chapter 38, and it's a whole different kind of almost story. It says that Joseph was sold into slavery. And as he was sold into slavery, the whole chapter 38 kind of takes a whole hiatus from the rest of the story. It kind of takes its own kind of path into a different direction. And you're like, I thought I was reading about Joseph, but now it's about Judah and what Judah does. Now, Judah was actually the son of Jacob too, and he was the brother of Joseph. And Judah was actually the guy who told his brothers to sell Joseph into slavery. You want to live with that? Think about it. Like, Judah told his brothers to sell Joseph into slavery. And what happens next, it says that he goes, now I want you guys to pay attention to this narrative, because it's so messed up. I don't even know how to explain it. But Judah goes and he gets married. He has 3 sons, and one of them, his first son, the oldest son, his name is And gets married to this other girl. When he grows up, he gets married to this other girl, and God kills because he's doing wicked things in front of God. And it is the custom of the day that what would happen there is usually if you had an older brother, he got married, and basically he dies, then you have to continue. You have an obligation by their laws, by the Jewish laws of that time. You have an obligation to marry your sister-in-law. I know for us it's kind of weird, but for them that was the law of the day, because women in that era, they didn't have any rights, so they had to have a husband that would provide for them. So if you're a woman in that era, especially if you're a widow, you had no inheritance. There's no way for you to actually, take care of yourself, because nobody would hire you. So you had an obligation. If you're a guy and your older brother got married and he died, you had an obligation to take care of your sister-in-law, and she'll become your wife. And Judah comes to his second son, Onan, and he says, hey, would you do this? Would you go and become her husband? But keep in mind, if you do that, then my inheritance to you is going to be divided, not with just you, but with your, if you guys have kids, then it's going to be divided, and your kid is going to be considered as the kid of So although it's your kid, it's actually going to be, is going to have a son through you in a sense. Is that confusing, or does that make sense so far? Well, if it doesn't make sense, go read chapter 38. But what happens next is Onan gets married, and he sleeps with Tamar. Her name was Tamar. But he chooses not to give her any sons. And because of this, she is still a widow. She is still not provided for. She does not have an inheritance. So the guy, Onan, he wants to have the benefits of a relationship of Tamar, but not provide any of the, not having any kind of responsibility of that relationship. And I think that's what God hates the most. Now, when we talk about Onan, we constantly think that his sin was sleeping with her, not providing an heir, but it was much deeper than that. Onan was selfish. He did not want to follow, the culture of that day. He did not want to provide for his sister-in-law. And God looked at that and said, that's evil, and killed him. That speaks to a lot of times in our own life. What God hates the most about what people do is not necessarily the act itself, is trying to, enjoy what God is giving us for pleasure, but not in God's timing, not in God's design. Is taking that out of context and enjoying the benefits with any of the responsibilities. And God kills Onan for that. And Judah, you think, hey, but he's kind of like a con man, He's just like, how about you go, he says this to Tamar, how about you go and live with your parents? It's actually Judah's responsibility to take care of Tamar, but he doesn't do that. What he does do, he says, would you go and live with your parents? And he's asking her parents to take care of her. And Tamar gets the message that Judah doesn't really care about me. He's not going to provide for my family. So she says, well, I'm going to make my own plan. And her plan is this, that she is a wicked plan. And by the way, anytime that we make our own plans instead of actually following God's, it usually turns up in something wicked. Read the story of Abraham. Every single time where Moses, when he tries on his own to kind of fix, by killing someone, it never goes according to what we thought it's going to be. So Tamar gets into this clothes of a prostitute, and she hears that, Judah is going to come by the town, and he tricks Judah into thinking that she's a prostitute, and Judah sleeps with Tamar, and Tamar now is pregnant by Judah. I know it's really messed up, and you thought your family had problems. This is some really deep family problems here. And he sleeps with his, with his daughter, pretty much in law. But, before they make this deal to sleep together, she says, what are you going to give me? And he promises her lamb and so on and so forth. And she says, okay, well, how do I know you're going to actually send the payment? And he says, well, here's my seal, here's my staff, and one more item that he gave her. Says, okay, this is how you're going to know that I'm going to send my payment. Once I send my payment, send these stuff back. Well, she takes the stuff and goes home. He goes home, and he sends payment, But nobody can find the prostitute because it's not really a prostitute, it's just Tamar. But Tamar keeps all his stuff. And one day, now pay attention to this. Now one day, Judah hears that Tamar is pregnant. And he says, you know what? Bring her out and burn her. She's been unfaithful. And as they bring her out, she pulls the stuff out and says, I got pregnant by the man who owns these things. And everyone's like, I think that those are Judah's. We know his seal. We've seen his staff. Well, this is a scandal. This is a scandal of major proportions. Even in that time, this is really wicked. And Judah is, he has a choice. He could just deny and say, I don't know how you got this. Burn her anyway. But we see something else happens here. Judah comes to his senses. And he says, actually, guys, I'm sorry to say, but she's right. He says, in the biblical language, it says, she's more righteous than I am. Judah admits his guilt. He says, what I've done, this is not right. So he decides to take care of her. And he was tricked into it. But when I look at this story, I'm just like, whoa, that's really messed up. But from this point on, what we see is a different Judah. Now I want to take a moment to speak to you. And maybe you're kind of wondering just about now, okay, where is all this going? Why are we talking about somebody sleeping with their daughter-in-law? Well, because it's the Bible. But how does this apply to our life? You see, when we sin in God's sight, we don't just disregard that and say, well, that's just, it's my fault. Oh, I'm sorry, big deal. It's not a big deal. We don't dismiss that. Because you see, when Judah sold Joseph into slavery, he didn't repent. And that escalated. His sin escalated to the point where he is the laugh of the whole town because of what he's doing what he did with his daughter-in-law. When you start to accept the fact that, yes, I've sinned, and God, what I've done is not right, and you don't start pointing the blame around, it changes you. When you begin to bring your sin to the Lord and say, God, would you forgive me? This is when you start to encounter grace. When you start to encounter grace, this is when it starts to change you from inside out. And we see that Judah's life starts to take a different turn. You know how we know this? Later down the road, somehow we go. So this is the story of Joseph, and then chapter 38 goes all the way out here, and it's just a weird story about Judah and Tamar, and then the story gets back on track, back with Joseph. And it says that Joseph he lives in Egypt, and now he becomes like this, big guy with a lot of power and a lot of authority and a lot of influence. And we see this moment where whole Judah and all his brothers show up before Joseph. And Joseph, I don't know what he was thinking, but given his actions, I can speculate what he was doing. You know what Joseph was doing the whole time? Because we have these weird kind of things that he does. First, he kind of sends them back, and leaves one of the guys there, and then he asks them to bring Benjamin. And it's kind of weird. Why would Joseph not come out and say, guys, it's me. It's been me all along. He doesn't do that. He says, bring Benjamin. So they bring Benjamin. And then Joseph, has this kind of dinner with them, and then they get sent off. And Joseph tells his guards, take the silver cups and put them in Benjamin's, sack of grain. And they do that. And obviously all the brothers, they get on their, donkeys and horses, I don't know what they had, and they head back thinking that everything's okay. But then Joseph sends his guards. He says, hey, bring him back. And they are brought back. And in a sense, Joseph's kind of playing a game here. Why would you go through all this theater? Why? Why can't you say, Benjamin, I've missed you? Why can't you just say, they're brought, and Joseph's actually has this indignation, right? Like he's mad about this whole situation. He says, you've been stealing from me. And the guy's like, no, we are honest. And then we start seeing the irony here. Really? Were you honest with my dad about where I'm at? Judah, were you honest with dad about, really, are you honest, man? And they're like, no, we would never steal anything from you. He says, okay, well, the guy who has my silver cups will stay as a slave to me. Okay? They're like, okay, check any, because we know we didn't take them. And they find silver cups and Benjamin, his sack of grain. And Joseph says, okay, well, Benjamin's going to stay as my slave. Do you guys see what he's doing here? He set up the whole thing. And now Judah finds himself in the exact same position when he had a younger brother named Joseph that now was in charge. And everyone was trying to decide his fate. And Judah stepped out and said, you know what? I think we should sell him. And now Joseph has orchestrated all this. And now Benjamin is the subject. What Joseph wants to know is, are you guys going to do the same thing to Benjamin as you guys did to me? Are you guys going to sell him into slavery the way you guys sold me? Has anything changed? What Joseph is really seeking here says, has anything changed since I left? Has God impacted your heart? Has God really transformed you? That's what Joseph's seeking. And guess who steps up? Says, we promised we're bringing Benjamin home. Take me as a slave. It's Judah. Something happened here when Judah was shamed and he had to deal with sin. When he didn't cover it up. When he started to encounter grace every single day, he was able to say, you know what, from now on, I'm not living the way I used to live. Lying and cheating. That's the power to have your life transformed. It's to come clean about the things that you know you're dealing with. And say, God, this is who I am. God, I want to encounter you where you are at. God, I want you to deal with all this conviction. Now the Holy Spirit is speaking to your heart even right now. And you know what you're dealing with. You see, because there will be a time where God's going to orchestrate a whole scenario to see where your true allegiance lies. It came with everyone. If you study the Old Testament, we're coming to a close here, but if you study the Old Testament, you're going to see constantly where God sets up situations where you have to define yourself. Where's my true allegiance? And at the beginning, we talked about John the Baptist. When he is squeezed from every single direction, your true, your true kind of like allegiances will come out. Your true doubts will come out. The things that you've been dealing with will come out. When somebody bumps into you, when somebody does you wrong, the true you is going to come out. And in that moment, you have a choice to face the sin in your life and say, I will no longer live like this. I will no longer deal with this. I will come and put it on the cross. I will encounter grace what God has encountered me. And I will say, I will no longer live like Judah lived. And you see, in all these stories that we talked about, Judah, there's hope. Because you see, at the beginning of the New Testament, we talked about, the genealogies. We see that Judah is mentioned, and it says that Jesus is going to be the line of Judah. It doesn't say the line of Joseph, it says the line of Judah. You see, through this brokenness in the family, God works, and then the kid that Tamar has, she actually has twins, but one of them, his name is Perez, and Jesus actually comes through the line of Perez. And now every single time we talk about Jesus and his bloodline, we talk about Tamar, we talk about all these people that contributed, although they were broken people with a past, people that were not, that their stories, I mean, think about it. You live in Jerusalem, when people get stoned for adultery and you've slept with your father-in-law, that's pretty scandalous. But God says, you know what? I will take this nasty thing and I'll turn it into a beautiful thing. And when it came to John, when he is at the end of his life and he's getting cornered by everything, I want to read you this passage. And in verse 7 says this: as they went, so after they came and asked Jesus, and Jesus says, look, the poor they have the good news preached to them, the blind see, the lame walk. Blessed are those who do not stumble on my account. And he goes on to say, as they went, Jesus began to speak to the crowds concerning John. What did you go out into the wilderness to see? A reed shaken by the wind? What did you go out to see? A man dressed in soft clothing? Behold, those who wear soft clothing are in the king's houses. What did you go out to see? A prophet? Yes, I tell you, more than a prophet. This is him, or this is he of whom it's written, behold, I send a messenger before your face, who will prepare your way before you. Now listen to this. Truly I say to you, among those born among women, there has arisen no one greater than John the Baptist. No one greater than John the Baptist. Do you see what I see here? When John is thinking that my life is over, he's questioning his calling. He's going through a really difficult time. He's not really sure who his enemies and his friends are. He's not sure about Jesus. You know what Jesus says about John? He's the greatest prophet that has ever lived. You know what that says to us? In your struggle against sin, in your struggle and walking underneath the frown of heaven, and in your struggle, God looks at your life and says, you know what? I am actually really proud of Julie and Tanya and Dave. When you think you're your lowest, God looks at your life and says, you know what? You struggle as sons and daughters. You're mine. When John thought that his life was over, God is speaking really good things about him. If you knew the things that God says about you, do you think that you would not be encouraged? Do you understand the encouragement that John would have if you only knew what Jesus said about him? Yeah, he was one of the greatest prophets. So my message for you today is this: stop walking underneath condemnation. Stop walking like everyone's mad at you and everyone is out to get you. If there's sin in your life, Jesus came to give us grace. And Jesus has chosen you and me and everyone in this place. Before even he knew how we run, before even he knew how we, I mean, he knows everything really, but before we even proved ourselves, Jesus looked at you and me and says, I want you on my team. You're part. Yeah, I know the problems in your family. I know the brokenness in your childhood. I know all the times you walked away from church and then came back. I've known everything there is to know about you. And guess what? Even when you're still a sinner, even when you spit in my face, I chose to give everything there is, everything, the most precious things of heaven for you. That doesn't give us license to go and sin. That gives us license to come and be redeemed. That gives us license to encounter grace. And then we're no longer going around and start pointing, well, but what about this person? What about this person? No, you come and say, you know what, Lord, if there's someone that needs to be sold, it's going to be me. I'm sacrificing myself for my brother and sister. I think the problem that we have in our ministry is not that we don't have people who are equipped to do the ministry. I just think that we haven't fully encountered grace. If you're not willing to give 2 hours of your time to meet up with someone for coffee, are you really going to lay your life down for that person? If you cannot believe the best about someone, even though they've made you really, really mad, even though they said really bad things about you, are you willing to die for that person? Are you willing to sell yourself? You see, when you understand the sacrifice that Jesus has done for us, that changes us. But if we are not changed, we should really wonder if we encountered His sacrifice, if we encountered Him. Judah would still go on and live his brokenness. If he kept on going at the pace that he was at, then we will probably not read about him today. But how thankful I am that the Holy Spirit came and exposed his sin. And he chose, instead of going on the offensive and start accusing her, and because he had the power to go and do whatever he wanted to do, he got humbled by it. Now, if you're a leader in the house, if you're maybe leading some kind of block and maybe somebody's challenging you, you have the power to shut them down. But the question is, are you going to choose to go the way of grace, or are you going to go to choose the way of condemnation? Are you going to choose to demand people do stuff to be that they might earn your acceptance? Where in light of our acceptance by Him, He'll say, you know what? I love you and I care about you before you even become a Christian. That is the message of the gospel, guys. That is what God has called us to do. That is ultimately what God has commissioned us to do. Is when we deal with sin, to be honest about it, and say, God, we've sinned against you. And if it's against another person, if it's against if you're married, your wife, if you're not married, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your friend, your family, your parents, if God has convicted you, do not try to run away from that. Say, God, I'm gonna be honest about this. If God has maybe convicted you about your commitments, if you still have a really hard time to show here up on time, there's a weight that carries. Do you understand? When you consider showing up to work for your boss more important than showing up, like think about this. If you told, in the way that maybe it's more intimate, if you're dating someone and you really love this person, and you say, hey, we're gonna go on a date and we're gonna meet at 7 o'clock, and you come the first day and you're 7:15, you go, I'm so sorry. I was like caught up in traffic. Oh yeah, you're fine. I mean, that's fine. I mean, I was actually on my phone the whole time. It's fine. It's not a big deal. Next time you're late, 30 minutes. Oh, something really bad happened. And the person, okay, well, I mean, it's kind of 2 times in a row. And then you show up again. And you make up some other excuse. It goes on and on and on. Can you really believe that that person thinks that you're serious about this? Do you understand maybe she would have a lot of doubts about what kind of relationship you guys would have? You say you love me, but your actions don't say that. Or what if I went on a date and she's in front of me and I'm constantly looking for anybody else that comes in? Oh, hey. Oh, what were we talking about? Oh yeah, that, your school. About that. Hi, hey. She'd probably be like, okay, are you talking to me? Are you saying hi to the person behind me? Like, what is going on? But I feel like with God, we do that a lot. Oh, hey. Can you really say? Now, I'm not trying to tell you again that, oh yeah, well, you should get better at doing this. You should, like, if you got out of this whole message that I just gotta be on time. One more thing to do, then that's the wrong way about this. What I'm hoping you would do, or you would experience, because every single time I use the word do, it automatically sounds legalistic. What I hope you experience is that you get so excited about the things of God that if you are excited about Seahawks, you make sure you're on time. Like, you put in a sacrifice for the things that you love and for the people you love. And I'm hoping that we as a church will get so passionate about the Lord that all the doing part will come naturally. I'm not going to have a list of things that I have to do. It's going to be, hey, I love the Lord, and this is where I'm at. And I'm going to change my whole schedule around, not because I have to do it, but because I look forward to encounter the people. I look forward to encounter the Lord. I mean, I look forward to that. And but if that doesn't happen, if to use the to-do list, then there's a break in your relationship with God. It's just that simple. So, we're going to go to prayer. But my hope, we are really over time, but my hope is this, that as you go out this week, you would encounter grace. I challenge you, every single day, going from now on, if someone's getting on your nerves, that you say, like yesterday I was walking through Walmart, and I was just like doing this, and if you know me, I do not multitask, and I don't know where I'm going, so I'm looking for things, and this girl that she has her cart, and she's trying to go this way, and I need notice her, and I went the same way, and she looks at me and she's like, seriously? And I was like, and then to the point, like, this is what I felt inside. I was like, I was gonna turn around and be like, really? Like, really? And then the Holy Spirit convicted me. It's like, really? This is how you're gonna respond? So I challenge you, every single time you got a moment like that, I say, you know what? Or today at work, where this lady started making a lot of comments. I mean, she complains a lot. And she made a comment like, oh, who's gonna take the garbage? And another lady says, oh, I'll take it out. And she looks around and says, thanks for the help, guys. And one of the guys just gets really mad and walks out of the room. And I'm like, hey guys, like I'm cracking a joke, and I'm like, this is not that big of a deal. Try to de-escalate this whole situation, because everyone just felt extremely tense after that guy walked out. When you get into an argument, do you have a tendency to escalate things or de-escalate them? Say, I'm going to respond with love and kindness and compassion. I challenge you that you say, you know what? When you're convicted, when somebody says, hey, Savik, you're wrong on this, that you would say, I'm afraid you're right. Could we pray about this? What can I do better? So would you guys stand? we're gonna pray that. I'm not gonna invite you up front, but would you say, God, what is that area of my life that I have to deal with? God, what do you call me to do?